The second my mother-in-law tapped her wine glass with a butter knife and asked the whole porch to please give her a moment of everyone's attention, I already knew how the night was going to end. I didn't know the exact words yet. I didn't know she'd point at the gravel driveway like she was showing a dog where to go. But I knew. You spend enough years reading a room, you stop needing the room to spell it out for you. Here's the part nobody tells you about that kind of moment. It isn't loud on the inside. There's no roar in your ears, no red curtain coming down over your eyes. It's the opposite. It goes very quiet and very slow. And while 40 relatives look at you like you're a stain on a tablecloth, some cold and calm part of your brain just quietly starts doing math. Where the car keys are, what time the last flight leaves, which lawyer you're going to call in the morning. My name is Adam Keller. I was married to Diana for 12 years. I'm the guy who rewired her parents' entire lake house for free the summer their breaker panel started smoking. I'm the guy who drove 90 minutes each way to pick her grandmother up for Christmas because nobody else had the time. I'm the guy who showed up to every single one of these reunions, 13 of them, smiling, helpful, and completely invisible. I want you to really understand who I was before that weekend, because it's the only way you'll understand who I decided to become by the end of it. If you're new here, welcome. This is the channel where we tell the true-to-life stories of ordinary people who got pushed 1 inch too far, and what they did about it once they stopped asking for permission. If a story like this hits somewhere close to home for you, do me a favour and hit that subscribe button and drop a like, because these are the stories the algorithm likes to bury. Grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let me tell you about the last reunion I ever attended. The Prescott family compound sat on the far end of Lake Lure, up in the Blue Ridge foothills, about 2 hours from anything resembling a city, and a solid 20 minutes from the nearest gas station. It was a beautiful place, I'll give them that. Big timber lodge, wrap-around deck, a dock that Walter, my father-in-law, liked to stand on with his coffee every morning, like a man surveying a kingdom he'd earned. The cell service was so bad, you had to walk to the end of that dock and hold your phone at a specific angle over the water just to send a text. I always thought that was fitting. Whatever happened up there stayed up there. No witnesses but the trees. Diana had been talking about this particular reunion for 2 months straight. It's going to be so good this year, Adam. Everybody's coming. Casey's bringing her new boyfriend. Renee's finally back from Denver. She'd say it with this hopeful light in her eyes, and I'd nod and say it sounded great because I loved her, and because I'd learned a long time ago that everybody's coming was not the selling point she thought it was. My mum asked if you'd take a look at the well pump while we were up there, she added one night, not looking up from her phone. It's been acting up. Sure, I said. Of course I said sure, that's what I did. Marlene never called to ask how I was doing. But the well pump, the generator, the flickering lights in the boathouse, those got my number just fine. We drove up on a Friday afternoon. And I want to be honest with you, that drive was the best part of the whole weekend. Windows cracked, mountains going gold in the late sun, Diana's hand resting on the back of my neck, while she sang along to some song from college that we both knew every word to. She laughed at something I said, really laughed, head back. And for about 90 minutes it was just us, and I remembered exactly why I'd married her. I think about that drive more than I should. If you'd told me right then how the weekend would end, I'd have laughed in your face. We were good. We were so good in that car. That's the thing about the moment before everything falls apart. It almost always looks like peace. We rolled up the gravel drive around 5, and Casey came flying off the porch before I even had the car in park. Casey was 23, the youngest of Diana's siblings, and the only Prescott I genuinely enjoyed being around. She had this way of treating me like a person instead of a household appliance. Adam, oh my gosh, you're here, you're here. She yanked my door open and half hugged me before I'd even unbuckled. I told everybody you'd come. I said, Adam always comes. Wouldn't miss it, I said, and I hugged her back, and I meant it about her, just her. Behind Casey, the rest of them assembled on the porch, the way a weather system assembles. Walter, with his arm raised in a wave that never quite finished. Marlene in the doorway, drying her hands on a towel she didn't need to be drying. Renee, Diana's older sister, freshly back from Colorado and already looking at me like she was pricing a used car. Renee's husband, Doug, next to her, giving me a nod that apologised for something that hadn't happened yet. Diana's brother Grant holding a beer, mostly harmless. And Brett, the cousin. Brett was 31, had never held a job longer than a season. lived in the pool house of somebody's second home, and somehow radiated more confidence than any man I'd ever met with a resume. I never trusted a comfort that unearned. "Adam," Marlene said as I came up the steps. She gave me the smile. If you've had a mother-in-law who tolerated you, you know exactly the smile I mean. It stops right below the eyes. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it, Marlene." She patted my forearm twice, the way you'd pat the hood of a car you were still deciding whether to sell, and then she turned and went back inside to whatever she'd been drying. That pat was the warmest thing that woman would offer me for the entire weekend, and I didn't even know it yet. I carried our bags in. I said my hellos. I shook the hands and hugged the necks, and made the small talk I'd gotten very, very good at over 12 years. And I told myself, the way I always did, that it would be fine. 3 days. I could do 3 days. Here's something I've learned about how families like the Prescotts wear you down. It's never one big blow. If it were one big blow, you'd see it coming, and you'd block it. Instead, it's 100 small things, each one so minor that saying anything about it out loud would make you sound insane. And that's the trap. That's the whole design. Each cut is deniable. Only the man bleeding knows how many there have been. Saturday morning breakfast on the deck. Marlene had made her famous cinnamon rolls, the ones everyone lost their minds over every year. She went around the long table, setting a plate in front of each person. Walter, Renee, Doug, Grant, Brett, Casey, Diana. She reached the end, the platter empty, looked at the space in front of me for about half a second and said, "Oh, I'll bring more out in a bit," and went inside. She did not bring more out in a bit. Across the table, Doug caught my eye and then found something fascinating about his own fork. Casey opened her mouth to say something, and I gave her the smallest shake of my head. Diana was mid-story with Renee, laughing, completely unaware that her husband was sitting at a breakfast table with an empty spot in front of him. I got up, went into the kitchen, and there was half a tray of cinnamon rolls sitting right there on the counter, cooling. I took one, ate it standing up at the counter by myself. Nobody said a word. He said, that's a small thing, right?" A cinnamon roll. I could hear how it would sound if I brought it up. "You're upset about a pastry?" No, I was never upset about the pastry. Saturday afternoon, the well pump. Walter gathered a few of us down by the pump house because it was tripping and losing pressure. Now, this is what I do. Not this exactly, but close enough that I could have diagnosed the problem in my sleep. I run an electrical contracting company, commercial and industrial. I've got 22 employees and we wire hospitals and cold storage warehouses and a data centre outside the city that took us 14 months. I have forgotten more about electrical faults and pump controllers than every man in that pump house would ever know combined. Walter looked around the little group. He looked at Grant. He looked at Doug. He looked at Brett, who once flooded a basement trying to change a water filter. And he said, "Brett, you're pretty handy, right? Want to take a crack at it?" I said, "Walter, I can have that sorted in 10 minutes. It's almost certainly the pressure switch. I do this for a..." "I think Brett's got it," Walter said. Pleasant as anything. Not even unkind. Just talking straight over me like I was a radio he'd turned down. "You relax, Adam. You're a guest." A guest. 13 years and I was a guest. Brett spent 40 minutes down there and got the pump running worse than when he started. That night the water pressure in the whole lodge dropped to a trickle. I said nothing. I fixed it myself at 11 that night when everyone was asleep, out there in the dark with a headlamp and a wrench, because I could not bring myself to let a house full of people who couldn't stand me go without water. That's who I was, say what you want about it. Saturday dinner was the big one. The whole clan, the long table dragged out onto the lawn, string lights, the lake going purple behind us. And I'll admit it, it was gorgeous and Diana was radiant. This was her world, these were her people, and watching her glow in the middle of it did something to me even after everything. I want you to hold on to that. Remember that I still looked at my wife across that table and felt lucky. It matters for what comes next. Casey sat next to me on purpose. She was my buffer and we both knew it. She kept my glass full without being asked, and every so often bumped my shoulder with hers, this little Morse code that said, "I see you even if they don't." Dinner rolled along the way these things do. Everyone talking about property values and other people's marriages, and a lake association dispute I could not have cared less about. I was happy to eat well and stay quiet. And then Brett, of course it was Brett, leaned back in his chair and aimed his voice down the table at me. "So, Adam," he said, loud enough to pull the whole table's attention, "Diana says business is booming. Remind me what it is you do again. You're like an electrician, right?" Everyone at that table knew what I did. Diana had bragged about it at every reunion for a decade. She'd stood in this exact yard and told them about the data centre contract. "Electrical contracting," I said. "Easy even. Commercial and industrial." Brett nodded slow, the way a man nods when he's decided to be unimpressed no matter what you say. Right, so like you wire houses, flip breakers and stuff." Renee laughed. Just a light little laugh. The kind that isn't really about anything funny. The kind that exists only to let a jab land softer for the person throwing it. A couple others chuckled along. I looked at Diana. She was cutting her chicken. Very carefully. She had heard every word of it, and she had made a decision, and the decision was to become deeply invested in her chicken. "Something like that," I said to Brett, and I smiled and I picked my fork back up. Casey's hand found my knee under the table and squeezed once, hard. I didn't say anything else, but somewhere in me, quietly, a page turned. That was the last thing I would ever build for these people. The last favour, the last fix. The last time I would let a room full of Prescotts decide I was smaller than I was and agree to sit there and be small. I just didn't tell anyone that yet. Least of all myself. Sunday. The last day. The day the whole thing cracked open. It started, the way these things always do, with someone wanting to be honest with me. That phrase, I've learned, is a loaded gun. Nobody has ever said, "I want to be honest with you," and then said something kind. I was carrying folding chairs to the storage shed after lunch when Renee found me. She'd changed into a yellow sundress, and she had her arms crossed, and she was wearing an expression she'd clearly been assembling all weekend, maybe all year. "Adam, can I be honest with you?" I set the chairs down. "Sure, Renee." "Diana isn't happy." She let that sit. "She hides it, but we can all see it. She's stressed all the time. She's not herself. And Adam, I'm sorry, but we all think a lot of that has to do with you." There it was. The whole weekend, the whole decade, boiled down into one sentence delivered by a woman who'd been undercutting me since our wedding rehearsal. "That's a lot," I said carefully. "You know this is between me and Diana. It stopped being just between you two when it started affecting this whole family." And then she listed it out for me. My hours, my obsession with the company. How I never really tried with her parents. How cold I was with her mother. How I made everyone feel judged. She'd rehearsed it. You could hear the rehearsal in it. I stood there and let her get all the way to the end. And then I said, "Thank you for your honesty, Renee. I mean that." And I picked the chairs back up and carried them to the shed, because I'd be damned if I was going to leave a job, half done even then. I found Diana down by the water afterward, standing alone at the end of the dock, looking out at the lake. I came up beside her. "Your sister just cornered me by the shed." "I know." She didn't look at me. "She told me she wanted to talk to you." "You knew and you didn't think to give me a heads up? Maybe tell her not to." "She's not wrong, Adam." Diana said it so quietly I almost missed it under the water sounds. "You do work too much. You don't try with my family. My mum feels like you look down on her." "Diana, your mother skipped my breakfast plate yesterday while I was sitting at the table. She forgot." "She didn't forget." Diana finally turned and looked at me, and it wasn't anger in her face, and it wasn't sadness. It was distance. She'd already stepped back somewhere I couldn't reach, and she was watching me from over there, evaluating. "Maybe," she said slowly, "if you just tried a little harder this weekend, none of this would be happening. This trip was supposed to fix things. I've been trying for 12 years. She didn't have anything for that. She turned back to the water, and standing on that dock, I understood something with a terrible kind of clarity. That was the last real conversation I'd ever have with Diana as my wife. She was still standing next to me, but she'd already gone. I don't know exactly how the porch tribunal assembled. These things never have a clean starting point. One minute I was up in the guest room splashing water on my face and trying to reset, and the next I came downstairs to find nearly 40 people gathered on and around the wraparound deck in that loose, terrible formation a group takes when it has been talking about you and has just heard you coming. Marlene stepped forward. She was holding a glass of iced tea like a prop, something to keep her hands busy. "Adam," she said. I think it's time we cleared the air. I looked for Diana. She was standing with Renee. Their shoulders were touching. That told me everything I needed to know about which side of the porch my wife had chosen. All right, I said. Let's clear it. I'm not going to walk you through the next 15 minutes word for word, partly because there are no words that carry the exact weight of standing in the middle of your wife's entire extended family, while they take turns explaining calmly and with great disappointment all the ways you have failed to deserve them. Marlene talked about respect, about family, about how hard they'd all tried to fold me in, and how I'd stayed cold and separate. Walter nodded along at the right moments. Renee added colour. Grant looked at his shoes. Brett, I swear to you, ate potato chips through the entire proceeding like it was a ball game. And then Marlene set down her tea and delivered the line she'd clearly been carrying up her sleeve all weekend. Adam, the way I see it, you've got two choices here. She held up two fingers. You can apologise to this family, a real apology, and we can all move forward like adults. Or, she tilted her head toward the gravel drive, maybe it's best you head home early. The porch went dead silent. Even the lake seemed to quiet down. I looked at Diana one more time, slowly, deliberately. I gave her every second in the world to say one word, to step off Renee's side of the porch and stand next to her husband. Anything. She looked at the floorboards. Two choices, Adam, Marlene said again, firmer now, like a judge running out of patience. Apologise or go. I took a breath, and then I smiled. A real one, which I could see landed wrong on several faces because a smile was the last thing they'd prepared for. Thank you, Marlene, I said. That's the most honest anyone in this family has been with me in 12 years. I appreciate the clarity. And I went inside to pack. I want to tell you what happened in that guest room, because it's the exact moment everything changed. And it wasn't dramatic. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I walked to the window to get one bar. I opened the airline app I use for work travel, Charlotte to home. There was a flight at 7:05, about 2 hours out. One way. I booked it. 3 taps. One way, and not because I was being theatrical about it, because it was honest. I wasn't coming back to that house, and buying a round trip would have been a lie I told myself to feel better. Then I packed. And here's the thing. I packed the way I do everything. Neat. Folded. Calm. 12 years of business travel had made me a man who could pack a bag in 5 minutes without a single wrinkle. And I felt that same calm settle over me now, because some part of me had been packing for this trip for a lot longer than 5 minutes. There was a soft knock and Casey slipped in, her eyes already red. Adam, don't, please, just go back out there and say something, anything, and it'll blow over. It always blows over. I zipped the bag. It always blows over for them, Casey. It never blows over for me. There's a difference. Please. I put my hands on her shoulders. Listen to me. I'm not angry at you. I need you to hear that. You've been the one good thing in that whole family for 12 years, and I'm not going to forget it. Her face crumpled. She hugged me hard, the kind of hug that's really an apology for everyone else in the house, and I let her and I hugged her back. Tell Diana, she started. Tell her yourself, I said. She's not going to come up here, you know that. Casey pulled back and looked at me, and the look on her face confirmed it, because she knew it too. I'm sorry, she whispered. You didn't do anything, I said. That's kind of the whole problem, isn't it? Nobody did anything. I picked up my bag and walked downstairs through the kitchen and out onto that porch where the whole family was still gathered. They went quiet when they saw the bag in my hand. Marlene blinked. Where do you think you're going? Home, I said, pleasant as could be. You gave me 2 options. I found a third. Adam, come on, man. That was Grant, of all people, standing up. Don't do this. Sit down. I appreciate that, Grant. Genuinely. And I did. I looked at Diana last. She'd gone pale and she was doing that recalculating thing behind her eyes. The thing people do when they were completely certain you'd fold, and now the ground has shifted under them. She'd been so sure I'd cave. I'd always caved. Diana, I said. Just her name. Once. The way you close a door. And I walked to my car, put the bag in the trunk, backed down that long gravel drive, and drove away. I didn't check the mirror, not to be cool about it. I just already knew nobody was running down the driveway after me. The drive to the Charlotte airport was the quietest 90 minutes of my adult life. No radio, no podcast, just the mountains flattening out into foothills, and the foothills flattening out into highway. And for the first time in years, my own thoughts had enough room to stretch out and breathe. My phone started around minute 15, once I'd dropped back into cell range. Diana. I let it ring, then a couple minutes later, Renee, which took some nerve, then Marlene, which honestly surprised me, then Diana again, then a text from Diana. Adam, where are you going? Then, call me. This is childish. Then, after a longer gap, please. I read that last one at a red light on the edge of Charlotte. One word. And I could hear exactly how she'd typed it, and it wasn't scared, and it wasn't sorry. It was inconvenienced. It was the please of someone who fully expected the problem to fix itself, the way problems always had, the way I always had. I turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove to the airport. I parked in long term, not the daily lot. Even that felt like a statement I was only making to myself. I wasn't rushing back. I sat at the gate with a whiskey and a kind of silence so total I felt like I could lean my weight against it. I called no one. I texted no one. When they called my group, I boarded, and when the plane lifted off the runway, I looked out the window at the lights getting small, and I felt, of all things, light. Like I'd set down a bag I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my body. I landed a little after 9, took a car straight to my office, where I keep a small furnished suite for the late nights and the early flights. Let myself in, poured a glass of water, and sat in the dark for a while. Not sad, just still. And then I did the one thing Diana would never, in 100 years, have predicted. I didn't call to beg. I didn't call to apologise. I picked up my phone and I called my attorney. Her name is Regina, and she spent 20 years watching marriages come apart at every income level you can imagine, and there is very little left that surprises her. She answered on the second ring, even though it was a Sunday night. Adam, it's late for a social call. It's not a social call. I need to know where I stand if I move now. A pause, the sound of her sitting down. How bad? It's over. I need to protect the company, and I need to move before she gets in front of it. Okay, Regina said. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. Now here's what none of them knew. Not Diana, not Marlene, not one single person on that porch. For about 2 years I'd been quietly getting my house in order. Not because I was scheming to leave. I wasn't. I loved my wife right up until she chose that porch railing over me. But I'd started to feel something in the marriage the way you feel a draft, in a house before you ever find the cracked window. Cold air, coming from a place you can't quite point to yet. And I did what I always do when I sense a problem. I prepared. The company was mine. Solely mine. I'd restructured it about 18 months earlier, after a genuinely ugly fight with Diana about money, where she'd made a comment about how half of what you build is half mine. That I filed away and did not forget, so I built the whole thing into a corporate structure that a sharp attorney could walk through clean. The real equity, the contracts, the equipment, the value, all of it lived somewhere a divorce couldn't casually reach. And I'd kept records, not obsessively, not like some bitter man building a case in his basement. Just the habit of a man who builds things for a living and instinctively documents them. Financial decisions Diana had made without me. A pattern, over years, of being cut out, dismissed, talked over. I'd noted it the same way I note a bad breaker, out of pure professional reflex. Turns out reflexes are worth a lot when the draft finally becomes a broken window. Regina called me back Monday morning. You're in an unusually strong position, she said. If you file first and you file clean, you control the entire narrative from day one. Do you want to do that? Yes, I said. Walk me through it. By Wednesday, the paperwork was drawn. By Thursday, it was filed, and Diana found out not from me, but from a process server who drove up to the Prescott Lake House, where she had apparently stayed on after the reunion, waiting, I can only assume, for me to come to my senses and drive back up the mountain to apologise. My phone lit up 9 times in about 3 minutes. I let every one of them go to voicemail. Then I sent exactly one message, the only thing I initiated in that whole stretch. Just this: you stood on the other side of the porch. I'm not going to argue about it. She called back before I'd even set the phone down. I answered. Adam, Her voice was shaking. What did you do? What needed doing? You filed over one bad weekend? This is insane. Diana! I kept my voice completely level, the same voice I used to close a contract. This wasn't one bad weekend. This was 12 years, and your family got one clean look at exactly how they've always seen me. And this last weekend, they said the quiet part out loud. Apologise or leave. And you watched. You didn't say a single word. I was about to. You weren't. Adam, please, we can fix this. Just come back up and we can talk to a counsellor and we can... I'm not coming back. I said it the way you say a fact. No heat. No door left cracked. There's nothing to renegotiate. I heard her breath catch. And then in the background I heard Marlene's voice, low and directing. And I heard the exact moment Diana's tone hardened because her mother had walked into the room and was now listening. This is not over, Adam. Yes, I said. It is. And I hung up. You might expect the next part of this to be about the guilt, the long nights, the man lying awake in the dark second-guessing himself, wondering if he threw away 12 years over a plate of cinnamon rolls he never got. I slept like a stone. I was up at 6, at my desk by 7. By 9 I'd closed out 2 calls and signed off on a bid for a warehouse retrofit that would keep 4 of my crews busy through the fall. It turns out the world keeps right on turning the second you set down the people who refuse to carry any of their own weight. The messages kept coming for weeks. From Diana. From Renee. Which I found genuinely bold given our last conversation. Even one from Grant that just said, "Man, I didn't think it would go this far." I wrote him back 2 words. I did. He never replied. Brett sent me something I won't repeat because it doesn't deserve the space. Doug, Renee's husband, went totally silent, which I noted. Casey called once. I picked up for Casey. I'll always pick up for Casey. "Are you okay?" she asked, and I could tell she'd been crying. "I'm good, Casey, really. Better than I've been in a long time." "Diana's a wreck. She keeps telling everybody you blindsided her." I actually laughed at that one. "Casey, I gave that woman 12 years of warning signs. A blindside is the one thing this was not." She was quiet for a second. "For what it's worth," she said, "you didn't deserve any of what happened up there, and I should have said something on that porch." I just froze. "You should have," I agreed, because I wasn't going to lie to the one person who'd earned the truth. "But you're 23, and you were surrounded by the whole tribe, and you're not responsible for the way grown adults treated me. So I'm not going to hold your silence against you the way I hold theirs. I love you, Adam. You were always my favourite." "Love you too, kid. Don't let them make you like them." The divorce moved faster than Diana ever expected, and I think that speed is what broke her more than the divorce itself. She'd assumed I'd drag my feet. She figured distance would soften me, that a couple lonely months would manufacture some nostalgia. That eventually I'd be the one calling with a counsellor's phone number, and we'd spend half a year negotiating our way back to the exact same arrangement, with nicer words wrapped around it. That man was gone. That man got left on a porch in the Blue Ridge foothills. Regina was surgical. The company was untouchable, structured exactly the way it needed to be. The joint accounts and the house were the real negotiation, and Diana's attorney fought hard for a piece of the business. I'll give the man that. He made a play for a share of the marital growth of the company over the last few years. Regina came back with documentation so thorough and so airtight that it ended that particular line of argument in a single session. His shoulders actually dropped. You could see the moment he realised he was outgunned. When the papers were finalised, a little under 8 months later, I walked out of that mediator's office with my company whole, my future clear, and a strange, quiet, uncomplicated lightness in my chest. The lightness of a man who has finally stopped pretending. I got in my car and I didn't feel triumphant exactly. I felt done. And done was better than triumphant. Done was peace. A little over a year after the reunion, my company had added 8 new commercial accounts. I'd promoted 2 guys who'd more than earned it, and I finally hired an operations director so that, for the first time in years, I could take a weekend off without the whole thing threatening to fall over. I bought a condo downtown. Clean lines, big windows, good morning light, and not one single square inch of emotional residue anywhere in it. By every measure a person could actually put a number to, I was thriving. I know all of this got back to Diana because Casey told me she couldn't stop checking my company's page, watching the new project announcements roll in, like they were wounds she kept pressing on to see if they still hurt. And I heard, again through Casey, that the family had a very different story going around. Marlene was telling people I'd fallen apart after the divorce, that I'd gone off the rails, that the business was probably circling the drain and it was only a matter of time. I found that deeply, endlessly entertaining. Because here is the thing about people who mistake your patience for weakness. When you finally walk, they can't accept it. They need you to be suffering. They need the man who left to be crawling around somewhere just out of sight, quietly falling apart, because that's the only version of the story where they come out right. Where the porch was just a little drama, and not the verdict it actually was. Where they were the reasonable ones, and I was the problem all along. I wasn't crawling, I was building. I was building the whole time. But the part that finally closed the chapter for good came about 18 months after the reunion, at a trade expo in Atlanta. Big industry event. Electrical and construction. 3 days of it. Good for business. Good for connections. On the second evening, there was a rooftop reception. A couple hundred people, drinks and name tags, and that particular hum of a room full of people who all want something from each other. I walked over to a cluster of folks near the bar, and standing right there with a drink in his hand and the face of a man who wished the floor would open up, was Doug, Renee's husband. We looked at each other for a beat that lasted about a year. "Adam," he said. "Doug." There was a silence, and then, to his credit, he stepped into it. "You look good, man. Business is doing well, I hear." "Business is great, Doug." He nodded and looked down at his drink. "Listen, I've wanted to say something for a while. I didn't agree with how that weekend went. I want you to know that. What they did to you up there, the whole porch thing, it wasn't right." I studied him for a second. "You were on that porch, Doug." "I know. You stood right there and you didn't say a word." He had the decency to look genuinely ashamed of himself. "I know that too. I've thought about it a lot. I should have said something." And here's the thing. The old Adam would have taken that apology, would have shaken his hand, told him it was all water under the bridge, made him feel better about the whole thing, so we could both stand there comfortably at the bar. That Adam fixed the well pump at 11 at night with a headlamp, so a house full of people who couldn't stand him wouldn't go thirsty. That Adam was gone. "I appreciate you saying it," I told Doug. "I do, but I'm going to be straight with you. An apology that shows up 18 months late when it cost you absolutely nothing and there's nobody around to see you make it doesn't really carry much weight. You had your moment to say something. It was on that porch when it would have actually cost you to say it. That was the moment. This isn't it." I picked my drink up off the bar. "Enjoy your night, Doug." And I walked away. So here's what nobody tells you about the day you finally choose yourself. It isn't loud, there's no swell of music, no slow clap, no moment where the whole family gathers to realise how wrong they were and beg you to come home. That's a fantasy, and it's a fantasy that keeps a lot of good people stuck for years, waiting for an apology that would fix everything, from people who were never going to give it. The real thing is quieter than that. It's a man folding shirts into a bag while his wife stands out on a dock and decides the floorboards are more interesting than his face. It's a one-way ticket booked in 3 taps by one bar of cell service. It's a phone left face down on a passenger seat, buzzing and buzzing while the highway rolls out ahead of you. It's calling your attorney on a Sunday night instead of calling the person who let you down. And yes, I'm going to call it revenge because I'm done pretending it was anything softer than that. But it wasn't a single moment and it wasn't a scene. The revenge was a decision I made again every single morning when I woke up and went to work on something that was entirely, completely mine. It was every call I let go to voicemail, every night I slept without an apology, every new contract signed, every good man I promoted, every quiet morning in a condo with no residue in it. Marlene wanted me to beg. Diana wanted me to come crawling back. Renee wanted me to fall apart so the story made sense to her. Brett, I honestly still don't know what Brett wanted, but whatever it was, I never gave it to any of them. They handed me 2 choices on that porch. Apologise or go. So I took the third one. And here's the part I think about on the good mornings. When the coffee's right and the city's just waking up outside those big windows, they all assumed the third option was leaving. It wasn't. The third option was never once looking back. 13 reunions I showed up to. 13 years of pouring my own coffee, fixing their pumps in the dark and being the man in the room had decided not to see. They spent all those years making me invisible. So the day I walked off that porch, I did the only thing left to do. I made them disappear. And the beautiful part is, I didn't have to stay in the room to do it. If this story landed somewhere real for you, do me a favour. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet. Because this is the kind of story that helps somebody out there realise they don't owe anyone an apology for finally choosing themselves. Tell me in the comments, would you have taken the third option? I already know what I'd do. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.